On January 10, 1954, the most advanced passenger plane in the world left Rome and climbed into a clear sky. Everything seemed normal. The captain was speaking to another aircraft nearby. Then, right in the middle of his sentence, the radio went silent. Fishermen near the island of Elba heard explosions above them. When they looked up, pieces of an aircraft were falling from the sky. No storm, no warning, no time for the pilots to call for help. The plane had simply torn itself apart in the air. All 35 people on board were killed. And the engineers investigating it had one terrifying problem. They had no idea why it happened. This is Failure Atlas, and this is the story of the Havilland Comet. Just 2 years earlier, the comet had changed the air travel overnight. Other passenger planes still had propellers. The comet had 4 jet engines hidden inside its wings. It flew faster, higher, and more smoothly than almost anything carrying passengers before it. It did not look like a new airplane. It looked like an airplane from 20 years in the future. But flying that high created a new problem. The air outside was too thin for people to breathe, so the cabin had to hold much higher pressure inside. Every time the comet climbed, that pressure pushed outward on its metal body. The aircraft expanded slightly. Then it landed and relaxed again. Expand, relax, expand, relax. Nobody inside could see it happening, but the metal could feel it every flight. The first major warning came in May 1953. A comet entered a violent storm near Calcutta and broke apart. 43 people were killed. Investigators blamed the extreme weather, and honestly, that seemed reasonable. The storm was powerful enough to destroy an aircraft, so the comet kept flying. Then came the crash near Elba. This time, the sky was clear. The flight was normal, and the plane still broke apart. The fleet was grounded, checked, and modified, but nobody had found the real cause. The comet returned to service. 16 days later, another one vanished over the Mediterranean. 21 more people were killed. Now, there was no easy explanation left. Something hidden inside the aircraft was slowly destroying it. The wreckage from the Elba crash was scattered across the seabed, so the Royal Navy began bringing it back, piece by piece. At Farnborough, investigators built a wooden frame shaped like the missing aircraft. Then they attached every recovered piece where it belonged. Imagine trying to rebuild an airplane after it exploded in the sky and sank into the sea. Yeah, that was their plan. Eventually, they recovered about 70% of it. The engines were not the cause. There was no bomb. The first break had started in the thin metal body of the aircraft. But why would strong aircraft metal suddenly tear open during a normal flight? To answer that, investigators took another comet and placed its body inside a giant water tank. They repeatedly changed the pressure inside it while machines pushed the wings up and down. One 10-minute test copied the stress of a 3-hour flight. Again and again, after a total of 3,057 pressure cycles, the test aircraft split open. They had finally made the hidden failure happen in front of them. Okay, grab a paperclip in your head. Bend it once. Nothing happens. Bend it back. It still looks fine, but keep bending it in the same place and suddenly it snaps. The final bend did not create the entire failure. Every bend before it helped. The comet's body had been doing something similar. Each flight stretched the pressurized cabin slightly. Each landing released that pressure. And near the openings in the aircraft skin, all that force became concentrated around corners and small fastener holes. A microscopic crack could begin at the edge of one hole. too small to see during a normal inspection. On the next flight, it grew a little, then a little more. Hundreds of flights later, the crack was long enough for the cabin to rip open. The air escaped like a tiny explosion, and once the body opened, the rest of the aircraft broke apart in seconds. The pilots never had a chance. The engineers call this metal fatigue. Basically, the aircraft was not destroyed by one enormous force. It was destroyed by thousands of ordinary forces arriving one after another. You may have heard that the Comet crashed because its passenger windows were square. That is not completely wrong, but it is too simple. Sharp corners do concentrate stress, which is why modern airplane windows are rounded. But investigators traced the fatal cracking on the Elba aircraft to an opening on the top of the cabin used for radio equipment. The crack grew around small fastener holes beside that opening, and the Comet inside the water tank failed beside a different opening, an escape hatch. So the real problem was not one window, it was the way repeated pressure attacked weak points around several openings in the thin metal body. The danger was not visible during one flight. It only appeared after the flights began adding together. The Comet was redesigned with stronger skin and smoother, rounded openings. An improved version returned and flew successfully for years, but the long investigation had cost Britain its lead. Boeing and Douglas used the lessons, and their new jets took over the market. Still, the Comet changed aviation in much bigger way. Aircraft were no longer tested only to prove that they could survive one huge load. Engineers had to think about thousands of normal flights, tiny hidden cracks, and what repeated pressure could do over time. So the next time you sit beside a rounded airplane window, take another look at it. That shape is part of this story. It is a scar left behind by an aircraft that reached the future before engineers fully understood how to keep it there. And honestly, that is what makes the Comet so frightening. It looks safe, it flew beautifully, it passed its tests, but with every flight, a failure nobody could see was getting closer. If you enjoy opening up stories like this and finding the tiny detail that changed everything, subscribe to Failure Atlas and tell me which machine or disaster we should investigate next. Maybe your story will be our next stop. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.